Good afternoon, Alex. Thanks for having me on. I was struck as I was watching your interview with Roth, that video of the three young women being released, surrounded by literally hundreds of masked, armed gunmen hooting and hollering and jeering at them. And I think Hamas thinks that that makes them look strong. What it actually reveals to the wider world is that they're a barbaric terrorist cult that uses sexual violence and torture and terrorism to try to intimidate people. What Israel has proclaimed over the last 450 days is that it as a country will not be intimidated. It is going to achieve peace through strength. That strength requires that it defeat Hamas. Now, Hamas is a military organization I do think has been decimated. The harder question is, as a political organization, has it been marginalized? To do that requires that Netanyahu helped architect post-war governance in Gaza that's Palestinian-led, that's Arab-financed, that's Western-backed, and that provides security and infrastructure and education to the Palestinian people.
We await the release of 2 American hostages. We believe the first will be Keith Siegel. That will happen on day 14 of the ceasefire, and then to be followed soon after 36-year-old Sagu Dekelchen, and Sagu has been injured. Do you have any reason to fear that they will not come out as expected? I mean, the tenuous nature of this, we have seen negotiations in the past. We have seen them fall apart on a moment's notice, turn on a dime. Are you worried about getting these Americans out, or do you think they're coming?
Of course I'm worried. Hamas is not to be trusted, of course. And I'm holding in my heart today Hirsch Goldberg Poland, whose family has strong ties to Massachusetts. That young man had his whole life ahead of him and was executed by Hamas terrorists months ago. And his tragic death, I think, is a reminder to all of us of who exactly we're dealing with across the table. People who just have no value on human life. So, of course, I'm worried. I do think that phase 1, though, will happen. The not to be cut is going to be in phase 2, because phase 2 has some ambiguity embedded within it about the degree to which Hamas is going to have to be marginalized from the levers of governance before the rest of the hostages come home. I am squarely in the camp that says Hamas can have no role in governance post-war.
And sir, as I mentioned before the break, you're an Afghanistan veteran. I'm curious your impressions as Donald Trump will be shortly laying a wreath there at Arlington Cemetery ahead of his inauguration tomorrow. What goes through your mind as you see him about to become commander-in-chief once again?
Arlington National Cemetery is the Union's most hallowed ground, and it's appropriate that the president-elect visit, pay his respect, perform a solemn duty of demonstrating to the American public the sacrifices made by our veterans and service members for our way of life. I hope this marks an inflection point in Donald Trump's relationship to the armed forces and to veterans. Previously, he has been either dismissive and mocking of them, or he has politicized them. My hope as a member of Congress, as a veteran, as an American, is that this marks a new orientation for him to the armed forces, and that he approaches them as every single previous commander-in-chief has, which is as his most sacrosanct responsibility to be commander-in-chief.
We have to, and I don't want to all douse those sentiments, and we're all hopeful that things will perhaps be different in this regard, as you've so articulately outlined there. But we have to remember what did happen in that very hallowed, revered area of Section 60 when Donald Trump you can say he was using it as a photo opportunity. A photo was taken of him there, and thumbs up, smiling in a very sacred area. Do you hope or believe that kind of tenor is a thing of the past within the next 4 years?
I don't think Donald Trump as a person has changed, Alex. I think that would be naive. What I can hope for is that he is using this great transition to become the 47th president of the United States, and recognizing that he's not running for office again, that at the very least he will set aside his grossest politicization of the United States military and try to act like a statesman. and at least put that veneer in front of the American public, because I do think it's important for the institution and for the United States military.
Okay. Courtney Kube, please join the conversation right now. I'm curious what specifically we are looking at here. I do hope you have a monitor, but seeing these stairs nearly full with people standing by for the president-elect's arrival, where is that in the National Cemetery, and what will be done inside that building?
So this is the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. There's an amphitheater right behind it. I'm actually not seeing exactly what he's doing, but I suspect, even just based off the way that you described it, Alex, that that's what you're seeing right there. As we were here earlier this morning, we saw busloads and busloads of supporters brought in, and I suspect those are the people who've been lined up early. I can tell you that, some of them were Medal of Honor recipients who we've recognized and done stories on. They were lined up and they were here to see President-elect Donald Trump lay the wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And I have to say, many of the people who we watched come in early, this is a very special place for them. They know people who have been buried here, people who they served with. And so this is a solemn moment for them to see the president-elect lay this wreath, and a very solemn moment for the country ahead of what's going to be a busy 24 or 48 hours.
Absolutely. And as I look at the scheduled timeline, that is certainly differing from the actual timeline here, it looks like we're about, coming up on 45 minutes running behind, and weather may be in part the reason for it. But tell me what we do expect. This will be the first stop, and then there's discussion about a briefing in a display room there, which I presume is in that building. Do you know what that's about, Courtney? There's a sort of a small museum inside that building there, and frequently VIPs, including presidents and president-elects, will go in there and they'll have sort of a tour or see some of the mementos that are inside that building. Most of them related specifically to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier and the amphitheater there. So I wouldn't be surprised if the president-elect also gets that. As we've said, I wouldn't be surprised if he makes a stop by Section 60 as well. And then he has other public events still on his schedule for today here in D.C., including a rally at Capital One Arena. We're expecting that later on today. And I have to say, we've seen supporters also lining the street behind me, Memorial Avenue, with flags and Make America Great Again hats and shirts. So I suspect we'll see that throughout D.C. today. Yeah, you mentioned Capital One Arena, which is where our colleague Vaughn Hilliard has the distinct advantage of being indoors there as opposed to you. So I do appreciate you being outside for us. Congressman, as I bring you back in the conversation as well, have you been into that area that Courtney was describing, this display room? Do you know what articles of interest and historical significance are there?
I don't. I imagine that there is some explanation of the site's history, which, of course, is that it was the mansion owned by Robert E. Lee, the Civil War general for the Confederacy. And that's really how Arlington National Cemetery came to be, is that the Union Army reclaimed Robert E. Lee's plantation and turned it into a burial ground for Union soldiers. And that is its inception as the Union's most hallowed ground. It's a fitting backstory for a president-elect to learn from as he takes over the helm of a nation that is deeply divided. What
is it like as a veteran to go to Arlington National Cemetery and see the dignity, the respect, the tradition that is embodied there for, it's goodness, we're coming on almost 200 years in another couple decades of its existence?
Well, it frames the great and incalculable sacrifice that our veterans and service members have given so that we can live in the greatest nation in the history of the world. And from the War of Independence through the Civil War, through World War II, this nation has been defined by its victories in consequential wars, and they have cost tremendous blood and suffering. And by acknowledging and paying respects for that suffering, I think it makes clear the challenge and the duty ahead of all of us who take an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. It's not an oath that has simply been signed with ink. It's an oath that has been paid for with blood.
On this particular camera angle, everyone, we are seeing Pete Hegseth. He is there in the lower left part of your screen. It looks like he is flanked by his wife. Of course, Congressman, that is Donald Trump's pick to be Secretary of Defense. Now that camera has just centered him up there. He looks very quiet. He's staring straight ahead. He doesn't seem to be conversing with people around him. He's controversial, that is for sure. How do you think his initial committee hearing testimony and grilling, if you will, by Democrats went earlier this week? And do you expect him to be confirmed?
I do expect him to be confirmed. I do not think his hearing revealed an individual who is ready and qualified to be Secretary of Defense. Just to be, clear for our viewers, the Secretary of Defense is running an organization with a budget bigger than the GDP of most nations. And this is a guy who's run 2 small nonprofits into the ground through incompetence and malfeasance. The Secretary of Defense is a leader of hundreds of thousands of officers and enlisted troops who hold themselves to a high standard of conduct. His past has displayed a lot of poor standards of conduct, and I think that matters. Right on the welcome banner for Officer Candidate School for the Marine Corps is Ductus Exemplo, leadership by example. It's a core trait of Marine Corps officers, and it does matter how someone has comported themselves in the past in what they are going to be expecting people to do. So I don't think he's qualified. I certainly would not be voting for him. I think he's going to get confirmed, and as an American, I hope that he is successful, because I want our armed forces to be the strongest fighting force in the history of the world.